Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. Hello, Youth Worker Nation. This is Doug Edwards and Youth Worker on Fire. Today, I have Carey Baker with me, and he's going to talk about his life. We're going to ask him some questions. Youth workers, you're going, what does a House representative, a property appraiser, a senator have to do with me? Well, it has to do with the people that you're raising up, the students that you're raising up, the people you're influencing, because they're going to grow up and they're going to do some incredible things. And Carey has lived many lifetimes when you have all of that stuff in your background. There's people that they wish they could have done one of those things, and you've done a whole lot of things. 30 years in the National Guard. And, of course, I interviewed one of our mutual friends, Anthony Sabatini, yesterday.
And he's awesome.
He is awesome. I think your influence, he wants to stay in 20 or 30 years himself. In the National Guard.
Good. Yeah, I almost put in nearly 32 years.
Wow. Mm-hmm. That's incredible. And you went to Lake Sumter State, grew up in Eustis, Florida.
Yeah, I was born right here, a mile and a half or so down the street. I still live here in Eustis.
That's right. And 50-year business. How many years is it now? Is it more than 50? The A.W. Peterson Gun Shop. Yeah,
it was actually, my family business is the A.W. Peterson Gun Shop in Maldora, and it was actually established in 1886. It is the oldest continuously operating gun shop in America.
That is crazy. Number one, local businesses seldom last 50 years.
Right.
And to have it the family business and to be passed on means somebody did something right. Somebody loved their kids.
Sure, of course.
And some kids had respect for their parents. So, because you just don't do that for no reason.
No, that's right.
And so then you went to Lake Sumter State. I saw that, or you actually Lake Sumter Community College at one time.
Yeah, community college at the time.
Yeah, I saw that you and your lovely wife, Laurie, is that where y'all met? Where did y'all meet?
Well, we met here.
Okay.
She was from Leesburg. And just ran into her. She worked at a local bank here. That's the first time I met her.
Okay. And National Guard since you were 18 years old.
Yeah, I was a senior in high school, and I raised my right hand. I turned 18 in March of 1981. In April, I was raising my right hand and started my 32-year career in the Florida Army National Guard.
Yeah.
And so it was awesome. And then I went to basic training that summer, and then came back home and started Lake Sumter Community College.
Now, is that when you met Laurie, or was that before?
No, because she's a bit younger than I am.
Okay. So, you had to wait a few years.
Yeah, I had to wait. She needs to, graduate elementary school, middle school, high school. That's sort of more appropriate.
Absolutely.
And, so she's 11 years younger than I am.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Because
when I met her, she can
keep up with your energy level. I've seen your energy level.
She was when I met her, she was going to Lake Sumter Community College, and we were married, and it was really easy for her to commute to UCF and got her degree. I mean, folks think it's tough, and it's really not that tough. You just have to put your mind to, really anything you do in life.
Right.
If you want to do it, you can do it. You can find a way.
You're living proof of that. Now, I've given some of your background to catch us up to date with all the things that are happening that you want to tell us about up to this date.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the offer and the opportunity to come here and speak. I'd like to tell folks, probably most importantly, that there's really nothing in life they can't achieve if they just want to.
Yes.
It's all about hard work. To me, it's about having a value system as well. I'm a Christian, and so having a good moral compass is always important. And you combine that with hard work and a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things you can do. I was blessed that I had a father that really served as an awesome example for me. He served in World War II.
Wow.
And so and my brothers, have 3 older brothers, they all served in the Florida National Guard. And so I knew when I turned 18, I was going to join the military. And I didn't know I was going to spend 32 years. And, I spent a year in Iraq as well in 03 and 04.
I know about that. And we need to go there, too, in a little bit. But go ahead.
Sure. And so... and that was just an awesome career. especially as a guard or reservist, and it allowed me to do things like run the family business. At the same time I graduated from high school, my father retired from the business, and so my brothers and I started running it back in 1982.
Wow!
And we still, of course, own the shop, and
yes.
And then it was later on, probably, I'd gotten married to my wife Laurie. And decided to run for office for the first time.
Yes.
And so that was elected to the Florida House. And that also was, inspired in many ways by my father. My father only ran for office once. He was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 1962.
Oh, wow.
Became the first Republican elected to any office in Lake County.
Oh, wow.
Of course, as you remember, back then the whole South was Democrat.
Yes, yes.
And then he was the first Republican elected official in Lake County. And so that was always in my mind, and probably one of the reasons I eventually ran.
Yeah.
And so I served in the House for 4 years. During that time, I was actually deployed to Iraq.
Yes, yeah,
and then
which is a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Heard about the yellow ribbon around
your
chair.
Yeah. They were very, when I was gone, and the Speaker of the House and the members tied a yellow ribbon around my chair.
Right.
So it was very kind of them. And I was actually able to call in several times from Iraq.
Yeah.
Led them in the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah. So that was neat. And when I came back, an opportunity arose for me to run for state senate. And so I ran. I was elected. I served 6 years there. And now I'm in my 5th year as Lake County's property appraiser.
Yes.
Which is a great career opportunity for a lot of young people. So I'd love to be able to share about that as well.
Well, I want you to share about a lot of those things, because right now we just talked about 3 or 4 other people's lives, because you condensed a lot of people's lives into your life. Because not many people run for the House. Your dad, in there once, but he wasn't then in the Senate. He wasn't in Iraq. Where was he when he was in World War II?
In France.
He was.
He missed D-Day, so the Normandy invasion. He missed that by about 3 weeks. He was in England, but he wasn't on that initial entry, and so he came in about 3 weeks later and fought for about 3 months before a German mortar round ended his career and sent him back home.
Oh, wow.
Coincidentally, he was probably no more than 100 miles away from where my great-uncle Carey Baker was killed in World War I in France. So by a German mortar round. So when I was in Iraq,
there's a theme here.
There's a theme. So when I was in Iraq, we were always being mortared, and I thought, boy, there's a mortar round that probably has my name on it. But luckily, they missed.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
You've got to think of those things when you're in Iraq and you've had this kind of history.
Sure.
Whether it's going to happen or not, but it goes through your mind. It's got to pass through your mind.
Oh, you do. But I never worried about it.
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable with where I am in life, and comfortable in where I'm going when I die. So there's just no worries. Those
That's
regards.
Right. And were you always this positive? I mean, you seem like you were just an incredibly positive guy.
Thank you. I've been so blessed.
Incredible.
And one thing I'm blessed with is probably a bad memory.
Yeah.
Anything that bad happens to me, I just forget. And
awesome.
so all I remember is all the good stuff.
Yeah.
So I wake up happy, and I, like I said, I have a wonderful family. You mentioned all the things I've done. It is pretty incredible, and it's been fun, and I love it, and I look forward to what I'm going to do. I'm 54 now, but I still think, what am I going to do next?
Yes.
So it's whatever the good Lord provides, whatever path He takes me, that's where I'll go.
To younger people, and we're talking to youth workers, teachers, coaches, youth pastors, volunteers, those people that you're dealing with, they think life is over probably about 25.
Yeah,
age 25. But we know that.
And maybe I felt the same thing.
we all
right,
did.
That's
right. How can we live that long?
That's
it's incredible. But then we got presidents that are, Ronald Reagan, I believe, was in his 70s. Now we have Donald Trump that came in at age 70, I believe it is.
Sure.
And so life is not over at 25. It's not over at 30. It's not even over at 54. Life could be just beginning. There are people that began careers in their 60s.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And my children are young too, so they're 11, 12, and 14. And,
yes.
And so just the experiences I get to have through them. I was a Boy Scout when I was in younger, and now my son is a Boy Scout, so of course I need to be an adult leader so I can go camping with him.
Exactly.
So I'm out there pitching tents and building fires and interacting with the boys and sharing some of the skills that I had learned.
Yes.
So I'm just sort of going back to what I used to do and used to enjoy.
You know, you guys who do some of those things, especially the Boy Scouts, it's like that never leaves. Talking about youth workers, those volunteers that are in the Boy Scouts that are taking these guys on camping trips, on their free time.
Oh, that's right.
On weekends and things like that. And it carried over into your career. Probably one of those things that was in your memory and your thoughts of, you know what, I like this. The National Guard just be a little extension of that, right?
That's right. Matter of fact, when, occasionally when maybe training wasn't going as well as you would want during one of the Army Guard events, the joke then was the difference between the Guards and the Boy Scouts was the Boy Scouts had adult leadership.
Yeah.
So that was our joke.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. And tell me about getting deployed to Iraq, though. Was that a shocker to you guys?
Oh, it was a shock. Especially for me. At that point, I already had 20 years in.
Yeah.
And I told my wife at the time, I go, honey, when I have the 20 years, that's a good career. We'll probably call it quits. But I really enjoyed what I did. So I just sort of held off retiring.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, things heated up in Iraq. And I get the call the day after Christmas in 2002. And it said, First Sergeant Baker, you need to call your troops, and they need to report tomorrow.
Wow.
And that's how it started. And 15 months later, I was back, but I was a member of not only working at the gun shop, but a member of the Florida House, had just been reelected. And so I called up the speaker, Johnny Byrd, and I said, Mr. Speaker, do I need to resign? I'm going to be deployed probably for a year or so. And he told me absolutely not. He told me, you're not going to resign. He goes, we'll take care of everything. Don't you worry. And he did, and they did. And like you had mentioned, they tied a yellow ribbon around my chair, and it wasn't necessarily for me. It was to remind everyone in state government that there were Floridians and Americans deployed overseas in danger.
Yes.
And it was just sort of a nice visual symbol with that yellow ribbon. And like I said, I did have the opportunity to call in occasionally to sort of cheer them on, tell them how things were going over in Iraq. And I came back so I missed an entire legislative session, and I came back a year later just in time. So I had no time off. So I came back from Iraq. You do have leave, but I had my legislative duty. So I went right in to the Florida legislature and started work the following week after I returned from Iraq. And at that time also, I only had when I was deployed, initially, my son was 4 months old.
Oh my.
And so he was just a little baby that 4-month-old baby, not a lot of personality at 4 months, just in your arms. And when I came back, literally now he was a year and a half old.
Yes.
Not talking, but walking. Maybe he said a word or two.
Yeah.
But so I went from this just little baby to a real live boy. And that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, yeah. And how did Laurie take all this? Here she is, a 4-month-old baby, and now you're leaving. And obviously, she trusts you, loves you, positive attitude. And hey, honey, it'll all be over. We'll come back. But tell me some of the emotions she went through.
Well, and she was awesome. And here's sort of the sacrifice that she made. I essentially turned her into a single mom.
Yes.
For a year and a half.
I understand that.
As well as she sort of sacrificed in a manner that she did not share all the negative things that or the bad things or the things that were occurring at home for my benefit.
Yeah.
Meaning she purposely did not burden me with knowing that the car broke down or the air conditioner went out in the house or any of that stuff. And that was really a sacrifice on her part, not to burden me.
Woman of steel. Pat Williams wrote a leadership book, Pat with the Orlando Magic, called People of Steel. They're talking to people just like your wife that handle things that the average person just could not handle. And that was courageous on her part. That's incredible. Young mom, come on.
No, that's right. That's right. So, of course, I'm forever grateful for what she did.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So how do your kids think about all that now? Do they hear some of the stories? I bet you, I don't even doubt that you don't even bring them up, but I'm sure Mom possibly brings them up, and some other relatives, some other people.
I like to talk about my military service to my children, and I still, if it's a military holiday, particularly if I'm asked to speak, I'll get in my dress uniform. So because I want my kids to see me in uniform.
Yes.
I want them to know their daddy served. And I also want them to be able to relate to other folks that are serving right now.
Yes.
You know, like I mentioned at the Day of Prayer yesterday, I mean, just last week, 3 young Americans that were killed, one in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan.
Yes.
And I want my kids to understand when they hear that, that they can relate that through me, that my dad served and I've seen him in uniform, and that might have been a soldier he might have served with, that sort of thing. So I just think it's important that young people understand that connection, and I can't touch all the young people, but I can sure touch my kids.
That's right.
So I try to parent with a purpose in everything I do, and that's just one thing that I like to talk to them a lot about.
Yes, and youth workers are listening to this, and here's, if I didn't say it to you yesterday, I think I did. When I interview parents like yourself, I consider you youth workers. If you have adolescents in your home, you're a youth worker whether you like it or not. And so you're going to relate with other youth workers. And youth workers realize that those parents know their children more than you ever will. We'll have one opinion about them, but if we get to know their parents, we'll understand that there are blanks that were not filled in. And it's important for us to know what the dynamics of families are. And you know what, when we talk about youth workers, really what youth workers are is family workers, because you're dealing with mom and daddy, and you're dealing with siblings, and you're dealing with grandparents.
Sure.
And relatives. So it's not just hey, we're dealing with some teenagers here. Just like you and your family, you're dealing with all the cousins. You're dealing with all those things.
No, that's right. That's right. And we all have our different parts in life. Like my wife, Lauries, she does the academics with the kids. Yeah. And, and they're straight A's, straight A children.
Wow.
So she, checked that block. And that's a big deal, right?
Yes, it is.
So she just does a wonderful job, and I'm out there doing more of the manly dad stuff, the sports and the scouting and things like that. So but it all works. It's a big team, and we do things together, and we travel together and try to expose them to things, and that also comes from my father was an adventurer, a traveler, and so he packed us kids up and off we went.
Yes.
And so I've tried to replicate that with my children as well.
That's a big deal, because you either put fear into your children or you put adventure into your children. I mean, there are probably some things in between there, but there are those extremes. And when you put adventure into your children, it takes away a lot of fear of what's out there.
No, that's right. That's right.
It expands their boundaries.
That's right. And you want them to know that if they want to travel halfway across the world, well, it's okay. You can, matter of fact, maybe they've already done it, to some extent. And my wife, she's had her own marketing and public relations business, her own.
Wow.
And then here several years ago, she decided she wanted to be a flight attendant. So now she's a flight attendant for Legionnaire.
Goodness.
And then here 6 months ago, she decided she wanted to add to that. So now she's a real estate agent as well. But being that flight attendant is very cool because we get to take advantage of her privileges.
Yes.
So we can pack the kids up and we can go places at virtually no cost to fly. And so we are currently taking advantage of that. And once again, exposing my children to things. Last summer, I took them to South Dakota. So we went to see Mount Rushmore and Chief Crazy Horse Monument and the Custer State Park and Devil's Tower and Deadwood, South Dakota. We went to Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane's, their gravesite. And so just trying to expose the kids to that stuff.
Western history, American history, oh my gosh. I mean, that's just like beyond.
No, that's right.
My son just came back with his wife from Italy yesterday.
Oh, okay,
and
neat.
My wife will fly Allegiant back here
good
this afternoon.
Awesome.
And because adventure and travel were a big thing in our lives. 2 of my children have been to third world multiple times. working in those situations. My daughter, who's the youngest, she's the one that, I was 42 when she was born. So Holly, they closed the border to Mexico because of the cartel.
Sure.
And the mission group we went with, we knew if they said it was not safe, it was not safe.
Right.
And so we ended up doing the Appalachia poverty area. But she knew what her brothers did, and she knew the difference. She says, "Dad, you never took me to third world." What kid says that, right?
Right.
Take me to the third world. We want it tougher,
No, but that's good. That's good.
And those adventures.
That's a sense of adventure in her.
Yes,
right?
it is. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so those things that you've done with your children, I absolutely relate with that. And we try to do that in student ministry. And we had taken students to Colorado from this small town here.
Sure.
We did it for 18 years. That's crazy because small towns don't do things like that, right? We go to big towns for that. Mm-hmm. Isn't that right? And that was a dream of mine, and God just kind of put that in motion. And before we knew it, 18 years was up. And we'd prepare kids for that altitude and because it's life and death. You go to 10,000 feet, and you're from the flatlands of Florida, you better be ready.
No, that's right.
Right?
Yeah, of course.
And so, but the things you're doing with your children are just amazing. The things you've done with your life. We expect your kids now to be in government. Okay, it's just write that down. And
well, that'll be their choice.
Of course,
because I tell young people, particularly if they're interested in elected office, mm-hmm. that they ought to have done something in their life prior.
Yes.
Be something, do something. It doesn't matter what. If you're going to run for office, you ought to have some degree of life experiences. And I don't care what it is, because particularly like in the Florida legislature, there's 120 members, and each one brings a different perspective mm-hmm. of their life experiences or their occupations. Yeah. And it all works out. So whether you're a business person or a school teacher or a police officer or a retired soldier, Marine Corps, Air yes. Force, all that works together. So I always try to counsel young people, if you're interested in politics, that's wonderful, mm-hmm. but, don't make that your sole goal. Have something else in your life that that you're an expert on, that you can bring to the table as an elected official.
And that brought up some thoughts with me. We about every 3 years would take students to a group of almost 20,000 students to a youth congress up in Washington about every 3 years, where they would learn to reach out to people in the name of Christ and things like that. And that went on since 1985. Well, one time, a friend of mine, Bob Porter, set us up with a congressman up there, and we went to the Florida Embassy. They call it an embassy.
Okay. Yes.
And the reason we say that, because no one, I think the governor at that time, the daughter said, "Well, why don't we have an embassy?" And so they called it an embassy.
Okay.
And so, but we went up there, and the one thing he told us, it's important that you become your own person so that you're not swayed by money or power or anything else when you're going into government, that you're that person that you need to be, that you're financially where you need to be so that you're not in danger of possibly not doing what you should do. And democracy is about just what you talked about. All these different people from different parts of society trying to do the best thing for society.
No, that's exactly right. And to your point, I mean, that's where a strong moral foundation is important. Mm-hmm. That's, the fear of the Lord is, the beginning of wisdom.
Right.
And that applied thousands of years ago, and that applies today.
Absolutely.
And then you add to that, and where you are confident in who you are, and you're not unduly influenced in the political process, and it happens, and it doesn't necessarily happen because of nefarious reasons. There's just a lot of smart folks that try to influence policy, mm-hmm. and they are smart.
Yes.
And there's smart people on both sides of the issue.
Yes.
and both arguments sound great.
Yes.
But that's where you have to step back as an elected official and to use your knowledge, your skills, your experiences to sort of sort through all that and say, okay, all right, what's really the truth here, and what is actually the best path?
Yes.
And sometimes there's more than one path, of course. Different ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, but your life experiences help you make a sound decision.
Well, you know what? And you see life differently than most people. You can't be in the House of Representatives and then in the Senate and then a property appraiser for the county, and you can't go to Iraq or be in for 30 plus years without seeing life possibly clearer than a lot of people. You kind of sense that sometimes about yourself, that almost like, you know what? If I had not been in those places, I couldn't see this particular thing right now.
Well, I think everybody has life experiences. And I know folks, I'm amazed constantly at what other people have done.
Yes.
So yeah, I've done some pretty cool things, amazing things. And I do think that they give me some unique perspective. But all of us, almost everyone has done something. Everybody I know has done something I haven't done. So that gives them a unique perspective on something that I don't possess. So yeah, I'm very blessed that I know certain things, that I've experienced things that others haven't. But still, all of us, you live life. If you live life to its fullest, and you live the dream, and you live life with gusto, you will experience things that no one else will, and that makes you who you are, and that makes all of us sort of special.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is why we're in the studio at Eustis High School, because of a few people, Mr. Klatt, who helped develop this, and Mr. Ligler, who has taken this to a whole nother level as a teacher of the year.
Sure.
And we see these people that have achieved these goals that very few people have achieved. But I want to talk about this. Give us the names of those three gentlemen that lost their lives. How old were they? And you gave their names yesterday.
Sure. It was Lieutenant Weston Lee, and they were all in their 20s. I think the lieutenant was 24, maybe 25. He was killed in Iraq. That was last Thursday. And then there was Sergeant Rogers and Sergeant Thomas. And they were Army Rangers.
Oh, wow.
And they were in Afghanistan, and they were just killed the night before, that Wednesday night. And they were both 23, 24. But all three of them had their whole life in front of them.
Yes.
Yes. But really what they did was just so important. Serving their country, the example that they set for their family, for others. And I just hope that they were right with the Lord.
Yes.
But it is still important. It's important for Americans to know that there are young people that in their early 20s that are just doing things that most 22-year-olds can't even imagine back here in the States if they're not serving the military.
Yes.
At 22, 23, 24, they were professional soldiers doing elite military missions at such a young age.
Yes.
And their stories ought to be told time and time again. We should know these stories. Young people should know those stories of those young men as just an example of how to live life.
And that's why I wanted you to give their names, because names are important. We like our names called out and called out correctly. Clark Blake, you've heard, Coach
sure, of
Blake,
course.
And we talked with him a while back. He called people's names out, and I heard him on a regular basis for many, many years when they graduated. He made sure that their names were called out correctly. He would bring them into class if he didn't know how to pronounce their name before graduation or during the practice.
Sure.
Say, let's go through your name. Let me make sure I get it just right. He said because it was important to that family. It was important that this achievement was there and that they were recognized correctly for who they were. Right. There's something in a name. No,
that's right. That's right. I think it was Dale Carnegie that said the sweetest sound to anyone is their own name.
Yes, yes.
So, no, it is important, and it does show respect to them. And, of course, it's easy for me to talk about those three soldiers in sort of the patriotic sense, but, we still have to remember right now their families are grieving. So
yes, they are.
Their feelings, I know they're incredibly proud of their young sons. But, right now they're planning their burials. They're planning to live life without those three ever again. And so it's important to be mindful of the families and the sacrifices the families made. So
yes, yeah. And I want to address you, Youth Worker Nation here. I've done a lot of funerals, more than most should ever do for students. Many of them were seniors in high school or right outside their senior year. It seemed like that was a lot of when some of the deaths would happen around here. But you're going to be there for those families. When I say student ministry, I look at 11 to 25-year-olds because there's several books out, and teachers knew this, that men's brains don't totally connect till they're about 25. Girls are around 22. And so there's a whole nother lifetime that starts at those ages. It doesn't end, it starts.
Sure.
And so we still consider that part of that area. And you're going to be helping the grieving of these families. You're going to cross it. You just can't help it. If you're in the public school system, if you're in a church, if you're a volunteer, and what you do and how you respond is going to be very important. And so let's go back to your church life and your high school life. Who is that one person that comes? It might be many, and your family, your dad.
Sure,
we get that. But was there some coach? Was there some teacher, youth pastor, youth volunteer between 11 to let's say 22, 23 that just stuck out? And
well, it was our minister, John Brackman.
Yes, I know about John.
Just such a strong, forceful, and really sort of an old-fashioned minister. Mm-hmm. But his messages were so powerful, and they just resonated with me as a young man, mm-hmm. as a youth. And probably so Pastor Brackman was probably very, very influential. Besides my family, of course.
Yes, of course.
I was blessed to have Christian parents, and so they led me. They made sure I was on the right path, and we were in church every Sunday.
You grew up in First United Methodist.
Yeah.
Right. And
of course.
Shout out to those guys. And,
that's right.
And a lot of great things had happened there. In fact, I remember doing several baccalaureate services in that church.
Of course.
In the beginning years when I was here. So. And
mentors and folks that you look up to are very important in life.
Yes.
In my military career, one of my platoon sergeants, Herb Gillette. Mm-hmm. Herb was my mentor. I looked to him to what I wanted to be when I'd eventually get promoted, and he, and he saw something in me, and he supported me and encouraged me and helped me be promoted. And eventually, one of my high points, one of my best moments in my military career was when I was promoted to platoon sergeant, E7, Sergeant First Class. I retired as a first sergeant, but really probably the most meaningful promotion was to be promoted to platoon sergeant, and that was the same rank as my mentor.
Yes.
So it was just incredibly meaningful, and then it turned out that was probably my best experiences was when I was a platoon sergeant. So it is important for young people to look for mentors, folks you can trust, you can look up to, that you can that can help set a goal. I want to be like them. And so Sergeant Gillette was that man to me in the military. And I've mentioned my father a ton because by far he was the greatest earthly mentor that I had in so many ways.
Which he should have been, and that's who we need to be as fathers, as dads. That is our first priority. And in spite of all the things about how coaches really help people and youth pastors and teachers and administrators, all those things, still the number one influencer of students is their parents. Sure. Number one, always.
No, that's right.
And so those things are
and when you see a kid having difficulties, many times you look and it's their parents or parent is having difficulties.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy nexus.
Yes. So. Yeah. We're influenced by our environment. It's funny, we talk about there's kids who have come up with horrible families that have turned out great. There's students who have grown up with great families who have turned out horrible.
No, that's right. That's right.
And all the way around, and good from good, and
sure. Well, at the end of the day, the good Lord gives us all our own unique abilities, and we can make choices.
That's right. We have free will.
We know all this. We know the preacher's son type stories.
Yes.
So we all have free will.
That's right. That's right. And growing up, some of my best friends were pastors' kids. Dr. Fred Hill, Greg Hill.
Sure.
During my late middle school and all through my high school years, Greg was one of my good friends. We saw the pains that they went through. We saw why a pastor's kids probably get angry a lot.
Right, sure.
And it had to do with usually the congregations
yeah.
and stuff. So, yes, those things can happen and environments and different things. What was your worst life moment? People relate with our worst moments in life. And once again, you've already swept all that away. We know that. So you probably don't even remember it.
No,
Let's see what you can come up with.
Well, I mean, there's several. I mean, probably the worst was, when my father died.
Yes.
So that was the worst. And then my mother, it wasn't as bad because Mom's health had slowly deteriorated. So we were sort of expecting it. And I had a good friend that committed suicide. And that still bothers me today. That, maybe somehow I wasn't there for him when I should have been.
Yes. Yeah.
As a businessman, one of the worst moments was when I was sued. A frivolous lawsuit, but a lawsuit that literally jeopardized everything that I had done in the business.
Yes.
And jeopardized sort of the historic efforts of everyone that came before me in the business. And those were pretty low times. And so, but, when you have faith and things worked out, the lawsuit worked out, while I was comforted by the fact that my parents and even my buddy that killed himself, they knew the Lord.
Yes.
And so that gives a Christian comfort.
Yeah.
And faith that there's going to be a better day no matter what.
And see, that's the positive attitude again, which we have to be around. By the way, if you're around people that are always talking negative, no matter how positive you are, it's going to pull you. It's going to bring you down. You got to help those people. You got to be friends to them. But the people you need to spend your most time with are people who see good out of bad, who see positive in even negative situations. They keep a great attitude. Those people will influence you to have a great attitude as well. I bet you related. I bet people that had gone through lawsuits, gone through the death of their parents, they were able to comfort you.
No, that's right. That's right. And I always just sort of remind myself, even when I'm in a difficulty currently, I always say, well, this is like the last 20. It'll be fine. It's a little tough right now.
Yeah.
But it's going to be okay.
Yes.
And it always works out.
Well, so. and that light, tell us about your best moments in life. Your best moment, if you got one in particular, but a few if you don't.
Several, I guess. In the military, some of my best moments were some of the training that we conducted. In Fort Polk, we had it's called JRTC. Has those laser mounted systems on the weapons, and it's a simulated combat, and it was just an awesome training event that my platoon did really well. So that was one of the highlights in my career. And of course, anytime you're promoted, like I mentioned before, that's always a highlight. And in my political career, when I think about the highlights there, I am very proud of what I accomplished as a state representative, and my body of legislative work as a state senator, and even all the really neat, awesome things I've done as a property appraiser and my office has done. But nothing quite reaches that emotional high of when you're elected.
Yes.
Because campaigns, if you're actually running a campaign right, it is a grueling, consuming, every day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, you're working on that campaign. And that night, the election night, when it works out for you, and you just feel that sort of validation of all your effort, that folks have responded to your message, just winning an election like this property appraiser election at the time, was just a very exciting moment. So I've had a lot of exciting moments in the military as well as in my business career. When I took over the family, my father retired in 81, and back in 82 we had a recession. Lasted 82, 83. So business was tough.
Yes.
And it was sort of neat as a young man, new to being a business owner, to go through that and then see the good side of that, see the recovery, see, we're finally making money, the inventory is back, things are looking good. No, that I still remember those times.
Yes.
And so there's just and then every day, there's great moments in my life every year. All the time, there's just great moments that I cherish, particularly with my family, but also professionally. I think of those and I dwell on the good stuff. Even just from a non-Christian perspective, the science of memory is pretty neat. every time you remember something, it sort of brings it up to the top of your consciousness. And it'll float down. You bring it up, and it comes up again. And the more you remember things, the more it stays on top. Well, if you bring up the good memories, they stay on top. But if you bring up the bad memories, it's the same thing. They'll stay, those bad memories, and they weigh you down in life. Yeah. So I just purposely let them float down in my memory and just stay at the bottom until they're gone, or at least mostly gone. Yeah. And so then that has nothing. And then you add for those of us that are Christians and believers, and you just add the faith that the good Lord brings us and the assurance that He brings us. Once again, life is we live in a sinful world, and bad things are going to happen to good people, and bad things are going to happen to us. Yes. But the way we can overcome that is through our trust and our love and our faithfulness, knowing that the good Lord is going to be with us and for us to the very end. So
that's it. Tell me, what would you say to youth workers, youth pastors, volunteers within the church, and then we'll go to public school to close out here. But is there something you'd say to them about their work with students that you would like to see happen, some things that you wish somebody had said to you when you were in high school, middle school?
Well, I think, these are very challenging times for our country, and particularly for those of us of faith. And so I think they just have to be courageous, forceful and courageous, and know that they have such an important mission to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. It's important not just to them personally, but it's, the good Lord gave us a direction. We're to go out and spread that word. And so to be forceful and courageous and do that. And then when they do that, they'll see the results, and that'll encourage them even more. Yes. They should just build on one success after another. But it's going to take effort on their part. Nothing good in life comes without effort. Yes. And people need to bring passion to whatever they do as well. Bring passion, if you're in a job, if your first job happens to be digging a ditch or working at a convenience store or a fast food joint, you need to bring passion to that. I have a young lady in my office. She was originally found by someone she was working in a convenience store, and I just ran into this gentleman. And he pointed her out, and he goes, I saw her in a convenience store, and she worked hard, and she had such a great attitude. And he goes, I knew she could do more. And so he encouraged her to apply at my office before I ever came. Wow. And now she's one of my superstars. Oh, wow. So it's just, so no matter what you do, and particularly when it comes to spreading the good news of Jesus, get out there and just bull forward. David McCullough is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote several good books about Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt, yes. He was a force of nature. Yes. And that's how he accomplished what he did, as well as he was very smart, of course. Yeah. But you should just bring that enthusiasm to what you do and just get out there and know you can do it. You'll see results. Those will encourage you to even do more. So those would be sort of my words of wisdom and encouragement for young folks. And what about to teachers and coaches? Well, I think they know that students remember them, but they need to, more importantly, know that students will remember, the things that they taught them, and not necessarily academically. My favorite English teacher, Doris Reagan, once had to rebuke me in class because I had a bit of a smart mouth when I was a teenager. Really? And so I said something that I thought was funny. Well, it was a little hurtful. Oh. And so Doris Reagan gave me a rebuke that I remember today and changed my behavior. Wow. And not only was she my English teacher, and I appreciated all that, but that she gave me moral instruction that I carry with me today. Now, I still think I'm funny, but you have to be careful with your humor that you don't hurt people. Yes. And so that was a lesson that she taught me when I was just some young, smart aleck teenager at times. And so teachers and coaches need to know that it's a moral example, and the lessons they teach that might be something that really carries with a student for the rest of their lives. May not be math. It may be math class. That's right. It may be what you've said to that student after class. That's exactly right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, sir. And Youth Worker Nation thanks you. There are students that are going to be youth workers and teachers and coaches and people as you and I were teenagers once, and now we live in our world and we affect our world, so these students will as well.
And so these youth workers, you're important. Volunteers, you're important. When you want to quit, when you want to give up, remember Carey Baker. Remember the things and the people that have said things to him and influenced him to become who he is today.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you. Youth Worker Nation, we're out.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.